Peace in a valley tomorrow, 'cause tonight he's gonna blow it all away. Feels so twisted, he ain't ever gonna fix it. He's just waiting for the light to shine on a brand new day. That light shine around.
Hi, good afternoon, it's Tony Farrell. It's 8th of October 2012 and I'm in the beautiful village of Eyam, and I'm with a dear colleague, David Pidcock. Afternoon, David. It's a beautiful day, isn't it?
It's lovely, yes.
And we're here just to mull over certain things that are happening in the first instance. South Yorkshire Police, they're having a hard time of it.
Well, they deserve it, because they've really abandoned everybody and let everybody down, particularly over the Hillsborough issue, and they've certainly got to do something to redeem themselves, with your case and others. But we have a situation where we have probably the most corrupt council in Europe. That's what he's classed as, and everything else that comes from that is also tainted. So Sheffield has to redeem itself on many, many fronts.
We'll focus on Hillsborough a little bit more now, because we've been on Burngrave Community Radio Station in 2010, about the time of our dismissal here in the Sheffield Employment Tribunal, talking about an issue that even today, 23 years on, and even in spite of the independent panel's report, which was done headed up by the Bishop of Liverpool, and I've read those reports now, and I've no reassurance whatsoever that the truth has yet come out regarding a certain senior ranking officer that was prominent in the day. On
yes,
that particular
well,
day.
and what you were able to tell us on Burngrave Community Radio was very invaluable, and the irony was that somebody was passing Sheffield and heard our interview and called the station, which was in those days Burngrave Community Radio. We've been taken off the air, by the way, since then, because it's clear that they don't want the kind of things that we're talking about to become general knowledge. But
and what are we talking about then? What's this incident then that you feel as though hasn't been disclosed?
Well, the irony is that what you were able to tell me about Andy Hymas, who was the press officer for South Yorkshire Police on that programme, confirms what I was told by the late Vinton Cooper, who was the BBC Radio Sheffield's commentator at the game at Hillsborough, who told me pretty well verbatim what you'd said, that he'd heard that the Assistant Chief Constable, Walter Jackson, was either inebriated or he'd had shell shock or something had happened, and he was completely out of it and hiding under the table. He'd gone, as Hymas had told, because I didn't know the bit about Hymas, but he'd heard that. And the other tragedy is that Vinton Cooper was murdered very recently, as soon as the reopening of the files. Almost immediately that we heard that his son allegedly had murdered his father. Now, I've been trying to find out the full story, where he's imprisoned, but I haven't been able to find that out. But the story being that Vinton Cooper, I interviewed him I was working then with Al Majd Television in Dubai, and also I did some freelance work for Channel 33 in Dubai, and we interviewed him, Vinton Cooper, who told me the story and then of what had happened, but also something even closer to today. In the village, one of our local painters was one of the senior groundsmen at Sheffield Wednesday football ground, and he told me that they were told that the reason that the gates were opened is that the crowd were leaning on the wall and that they had to open the gates. Of course, this was just the information that they were given. So, in effect, what you told me about what was told to you, obviously by somebody who we can't doubt his testimony because he was the principal officer, but it's corroborated by Benton Cooper, who tragically is no longer alive, but I'm still suspicious about why his son would murder his father, and pretty well close to the reopening of the files. So that's a big question.
So it is a question mark. And just so viewers are clear on what we're talking about here, in the stadium on the day, in the control room where the CCTV was showing the horror unfolded, there was a young press officer called Andy Hymas. And this is a story he told me on the 20th anniversary of Hillsborough, because he was there in the day. He was outside the stadium and had been given directions to make his way to the control room when the horror was unfolding. When he got to the control room, he tried to enter it, but I found it was locked, and that the police inside were very reluctant to let him in, even though he was a reasonably senior officer within South Yorkshire Police. So he had to double check and actually get instructions to force the door down if he had to. Eventually he did get inside. When he did get inside, he discovered the reason why they were reluctant to let him in the first place, and that was because the most senior officer in the stadium on the day, Assistant Chief Constable Walter Jackson, was actually hidden under the table, and he was a gibbering wreck, according to Andy, and the police officers around him seemed more interested in protecting his reputation and covering that up than actually gaining control of what was a terrible situation that was unfolding. And I think the point we're making here is that, 23 years on, and we've had the independent inquiry, and I've got no reassurance whatsoever that any of that story has been disclosed. I've certainly read witness statements that have been made and interviews of West Midlands Police against Assistant Chief Constable Walter Jackson, and there's no hint of any of this that's been disclosed. So that's a cover-up of huge proportions to protect South Yorkshire Police's reputation.
I'm sure, this is quite correct. What is also important is when you read the transcript, it jumps off the page. That one particular thing, as one officer is saying, that there was just no communication coming from control, and people would just didn't know what the hell to do.
Yes.
But that would explain why, because there was nobody at the tiller, or he was under the table, and this is something that is still being covered up, and this is most reprehensible, and South Yorkshire Police have to look at it. Now, after you started more recently, after all the months that have gone by since I wrote reporting this to South Yorkshire Police, I had an email about 4 or 5 days ago from the acting chief inspector, or related, was it Butler?
Inspector Butler.
Butler, who'd replied after all these months saying that they were looking at the evidence I'd provided and would be in touch with me. Now that nothing has happened until you started basically to campaign there.
Well, we know that on the 16th of October in 2012, in a week's time, the current relatively new Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police, David Crompton, has been summoned to the Home Affairs Select Committee in front of Keith Bass.
All right.
And the reason, my understanding for this summons to that meeting and that committee, is to notify the MPs and discuss with MPs whether any criminal charges are likely to be made against existing or former police officers. And so that should be interesting, whether in the light of what we're saying happened, and what Andy Hymas clearly told me on the 20th anniversary happened, concerning ACC Walter Jackson. I have no reason to doubt Andy's word on this. Now, the key question then becomes is that if ACC Walter Jackson is not among those listed, then we have a serious issue that the cover-up still continues.
Yeah.
And even though clearly South Yorkshire Police have been fingered for widespread cover-up of events in Hillsborough, and we're talking about well in excess of 100 statements being changed.
116.
116. And obviously it's brought the premature retirement of Sir Norman Betterson last week. So there are some interesting things going on there. Now, I hope and pray that the Chief Constable of South Yorkshire Police, and let's listen to the rhetoric. They're saying now, on record, that they're not the same force as they were 23 years ago.
They might be worse.
They might be worse. and a litmus test,
yes,
to be frank, will be the degree to which he names and shames
yes,
officers that were around Walter Jackson that may have changed the statement, and
yes,
Walter Jackson himself, in terms of what happened. If that doesn't come out and be exposed, then we're just as bad. And isn't it high time that the people of Liverpool, who've suffered for 23 years, knowing that the truth hasn't come out, if heaven help us if they try and cover it up yet again. They've had 2 chances already with the Lord Justice Stuart Smith, Lord Taylor's inquiry, now the independent panel led by the Bishop of Liverpool. If after all of that we still don't get the truth, it's outrageous.
Well, it is.
But I haven't got the confidence. I don't know about you.
Well, neither do I. I mean, you never believe anything until it's officially denied. That's what I'm told, particularly related to Sheffield, Sheffield Council and the police. But it is something that is strange. That why would he be sort of protected? What does he know about them that they don't want to come out? So there's always, we've got to look at these sort of, like with Jimmy Savile, he's finally coming out. What's been going on? But anybody in the music business knew what was going on from the years I was involved. You know, in the 60s, it was all well known, the kind of things that were going on, and the awful things that are happening now with these child abuse cases in South Yorkshire and Doncaster with Vicky Haigh. All these things are so outrageous, and they have to be. Finally, there's got to be a cleaning of the stables.
Yeah. What I want to just momentarily switching the subject from the Justice for 96 issue to something that I've really termed the Justice for 56. Yes. Because my South Yorkshire Police employers sacked me for speaking out against the Justice for 56. Now, what do I mean by Justice for 56? Well, you know that I'm referring to the 7th of July 2005 and the London bombings.
Absolutely,
in which we're told by the government that 52 people died and that 4 Islamic terrorists supposedly blew themselves to smithereens on 3 underground tube trains and the number 30 bus outside Tavistock Square. Well, all the evidence I've looked at as a former trained intelligence analyst, and I was the principal intelligence analyst of South Yorkshire, would lead me to believe that rather than that being the truth, the 7/7 London bombings have all the hallmarks of an inside job. And why do we believe that was the case? Well, one of the main reasons is you've just got to look at the war on terror, going back, starting from 2001 with the Bush administration and the 9/11 events, continued through the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, and now look at what imperialistic America and Britain are doing in the Middle East.
The issue is very important. That my interest is in forensic archaeology and information, particularly the 9/11 issue was just a rerun of what happened in Pearl Harbor, and the book that I've republished from 1938 shows that it was the British plan to get Japan to attack America, and that's all written down by Captain Sidney Rogerson, and the editor-in-chief of that particular book. There were 9 volumes. Propaganda in the Next War is the one that was done by Captain Sidney Rogerson. And how do you change the perception of the gallant Japanese hero from World War I into the yellow ape? Because Japan was competing with us in our markets. We'd sold the machine tools, we'd built many plants, and they were then selling their product in our traditional markets. And now Captain Sidney Rogerson was the Chief Public Relations Officer for the Federation of British Industry, FBI as it was then, CBI now. And then, of course, he was Principal sort of Public Relations Officer for Imperial Chemical Industries. And he was an officer, captain in the First World War. Churchill admired him, Anthony Eden admired him. And he was saying that how did we win World War I? Is that in November we'd already pretty well lost World War I. But the secret ingredient was that we promised the German Jews Palestine. And that's how Germany was defeated from within. In this book he's writing now in 1938, he's saying we must make the same promise in the next war, because we were planning the war for a long time. And it's there written, and it's on the congressional record, by Senator Nye in '39, warning America the Japanese are going to attack us on behalf of the British to bring us into their war. So it's all there on record. But so why the hell are we still worrying or wondering why 9/11 and 7/7 should not be the same? Because, you know, they were calling for Richard Pearl were looking for a new Pearl Harbor, Pearl Harbor, no pun intended, but certainly that's what we got. And it's all done, calculated. You know, the sinking of the Maine and other things, it's all been pretext. The first one was the War of Jenkins' Ear in 1700 odd. Just a pretext, but you build up the whole game so you can impose yourselves. You know, the application of violence is the secret of the West's success. But Pearl Harbor, 9/11, 7/7, all are done with inside knowledge, and certainly you've got patsies and fall guys. Muslims can't organise to have Eid on the same day. There's no way they could organise to fly those aircraft, and they couldn't even fly. Even trained pilots couldn't do what they were supposed to have done.
But it's interesting, I think, David, because from my perspective, Muslims, I believe, are being demonised now in that respect and labelled unfairly on the basis of all of this. And in your role as the leader of the Islamic Party of Britain, what's your message to Muslims in the United Kingdom who are being victimised really and labelled? And we look at, you know, the BNP march in Rotherham as a result of disclosures over child abuse cover-ups in South Yorkshire. Have you any comments on that?
Well, on Saturday, on Friday I was asked to go to London and address the rally that was held in the old Palace Yard opposite the Palace of Varieties, or the Palace of Westminster. And my address, I was asked to address them, to the Muslims, because what they're doing, going around and making all these noises, is totally against the they say they love the Prophet, but why don't they do the things that he would do? So I said, what did the Prophet say? And there are hundreds of people with that. He said, don't get angry, don't get angry, don't get angry, 3 times. Because he said, the one who causes you anger controls you.
Yes.
So they've got to learn, they've got to start to, you know, use this for thinking and this for football. And Islam is the best product with the worst sales force, and the sales force are all here. You can't sell anything to people if you behave in a way that is offensive. So the tragedy is that Muslims are ignorant of their history, they're ignorant of Islam, and they have to go back to the future. They've got to go back. As the saying is, when all else has failed, read the instructions. And that's what they've got to do.
But they readily accept, for the most part, from my observation, they've been all too happy to accept that there is a threat from Islamic terrorism, Islamic extremism. That's ego. There's totally... And you don't get too many voices. You were part, and perhaps Lord Ahmed.
So, Dr. Nassim.
Dr. Nassim. So we've got courageous Muslims speaking out, but they're few and far between by and large.
But this is a sign of the times. If you understand, or if you read Islamic prophecies and what the Prophet said, that the Muslims will become widespread, like the foam on the sea, Zabad al-Bahr. But you will be widespread, but of little consequence, no substance.
Yes.
And this is what we're seeing, because Muslims have become integrated in the system, which is a system which is alien to Islam, the religion of Jesus and the religion of Abraham and Moses. They all taught the same religion, and all the followers in one form or another. But the Muslims have actually done what the Prophet said. The Jews will divide into 70 sects, the Christians into 71 or 72, and his followers would divide into 73 or more, and only one group would be on the right path. All the rest would be in hellfire. And that's the point, is that when you point the finger, there are always pointing back at you. Muslims have to go back and realise what they're practicing is alien and contrary to the message.
Now, in terms of what happened with South Yorkshire Police, they were exposed last week, at least 3 consecutive days in the front page of the Times newspaper, with 2 or 3 pages in the middle sections, all about the child abuse. Labelling, Pakistani youngsters committing underage sex and a network of criminality. But the significance of that, I find, in terms of, you know, raising the issue of child abuse, it's one example that they've chosen to expose, but there's many more examples that they've chosen not to expose.
But look, if we had Sharia law, the BNP would vote that those people who committed those acts against those girls should be flogged in public, 80 stripes, 80 lashes, bring that back the birch. That is the Islamic punishment for what they're doing. It's something that, so these are reprehensible acts, but the punishment is one that should fit the crime, and therefore the BNP or the EDL or whatever, they should recognise that the rules that should be applied to Muslims, we're not saying it should apply to others, although they might benefit. As Jack Straw said, most of the wings in these sex offenders are not populated by Asians, but by white Anglo-Saxons. And so, but it's something, our systems of so-called democracy have to have scapegoats. You have to BSE, blame someone else, because if people are not looking there, they'll start looking closer to home, and they'll identify that the City of London, the banking sector, has created what the world never saw before, starvation in the midst of abundance. And all the societies, as John Ruskin pointed out, as a result of debt and usury, becomes rotten to the core. So you end up with corrupt police, you end up with corrupt councils. Everything stems from that prohibition that we've allowed, and everything that we built our society on now is rotten to the core, I'm afraid.
And you did mention Jimmy Savile, but I don't really want to get into Jimmy Savile, but the issue of child abuse and I want to just briefly explore the child snatching in social services with police complicity that is going on the length and breadth of the country, where perverse and irrational decisions are made by our secret family courts. And rather than go into any one specific one thing that's we're mindful of in South Yorkshire is a particular case which involves Vicky Hayes.
Oh yes.
We've been to see Vicky in prison.
Yes.
And
remarkable lady.
You know, I've actually had access to the full files, but we've got another example of I think police corruption perpetrating a really perverse and irrational result in which a young lady has been torn away from her young daughter and then thrown into prison in the most bizarre circumstances imaginable. And this cannot be right. You know, we've protested, haven't we? And we've asked to see senior management in South Yorkshire Police. I myself, as a principal intelligence analyst, having seen the files, cannot for the life of me understand the actual decision making. The only explanation for it is, as you've already explained, you know, the whole system is corrupt from top to bottom here.
To the core.
And I'm ashamed to say that I include the South Yorkshire Police, and in particular officers such as PC Britain in Doncaster in that process. But we've actually tried to get an interview, haven't we, with the Director of Intelligence of South Yorkshire Police, or the former Director of Intelligence, Detective Superintendent Adrian Teague. This all happened under his watch as Head of Public Protection, just like when I went to him with the terror threat.
Yes.
And his portfolio with the counter-terrorism. You know, he sacked me for speaking truth to power.
Yeah.
But he would not confront us. He would not face us.
No.
When we were, you know, we were asking, well, we were telling him we could help.
Well, it's all the same, whether it's the Baby Peter case, or as our colleague doing this programme was telling us about people being charged to see their own children who have been abducted from them. But of course, our system, and this is what I'm working on now, and God willing we'll get it out, is that once you've signed, or our birth certificate is signed, we are then incorporated into the system, and we have no rights. So there's nothing we can do in court, because under the system that prevails, injustice is the order of the day. And you've got High Court judges like with Mr. Ebbert. Yes. You've got the High Court Lord Justice David Neuberger, implicated in money laundering and other things, in this case of Mr. Ebbert, who's lost 1,200 properties and is being defrauded. And so you've got High Court judges, but if we go to Dickens, or go back to 1817 to William Hone, who fought 3 grand juries on the freedom of the press, defeated them. But it goes a lot. Nothing's changed. We've got mobile phones and other things. But basically, the rottenness is Masonic. It's a cult. We're run by an occult theocracy, and that's been part of my own research. After the Rushdie affair, you go in to find out what's behind it, and the deeper you go, you find all the symbolism is satanic. I can say that, and that's the lightest level. The other things are too awful even to contemplate on a film. But I'm still working on that. But we have a society that is. Look at all the societies were destroyed through debt, usury. The history of debt. 2400 BC, the first cuneiform library said that debt must never exceed 7 years. If you allow debt to compound itself, eventually your society will self-destruct. Alcoholism, child abuse, pornography, all the homosexuality and all these things come out because people are looking for escapes. And Thomas Jefferson pointed out, said the modern theory for the perpetuation of debt has drenched the earth with blood and crushed its inhabitants under burdens ever accumulating. So in debt, look at the history of Ireland. I mean, the only legitimate target the IRA ever hit was the City of London, where the contagion is. And within, my calculation was, and I did a press release, you'll see a settlement in Northern Ireland within the year. You can rest assured, you can bomb Warrington, you can blow up anybody, whatever you want, but you mustn't touch the money changers in the temple. And we were evicted from St. Paul's. I went there to address them by Lord Justice Neuberger. So the thing is that you can walk on water, feed the 5,000, don't touch the money changers in the temple.
Right. David, thank you very much indeed. Okay.
There's gonna be peace.
This is Mr. Slynn and the legal department. We're just coming into South Yorkshire Police headquarters. And I just want to give him evidence that 7-7 was an inside job, Mr. Slynn. I just want to give you
ever gonna fix it. Just waiting for the light to shine on
Tell us from Farrell Pidcock video. Won't you watch it?
Cool. I will do.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Let that light shine when I'm I need some company. You got that mystery. I need a plan. All I got is a compromise and a bag full of alibi. As empty as a bottle of whiskey in my shaking hand. But there's gonna be peace in the valley tomorrow. Tonight we're gonna blow it all away. Feel so twisted, we ain't ever gonna fix it. We're just waiting for the light to shine on a brand new day. There's gonna be peace in the valley tomorrow, yeah. There's gonna be peace in the valley tomorrow. He don't know if he's a communist, a hedonist, or a whore. Spent too much time riding on a white line to find the door. if it did, and he opened it, he'd find those letters in a hall. He's too blind to read between the lines, 'cause the writing's on the wall. But there's gonna be peace in the valley tomorrow, 'cause tonight he's gonna blow it all away. Feels so twisted, he ain't ever gonna fix it. He's just waiting for the light to shine on a brand new day.